Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome, welcome, welcome. It is Tuesday. It is 4 p.m. ET, and you have found us here on Crime Time on A Mighty Blaze, and we are so pleased to welcome you today. I'm your host, Hank Phillippi Ryan, the USA Today bestselling author of 15 going on 16 novels of suspense. My newest book, One Wrong Word, is just out in gorgeous trade paperback, and I am thrilled about that. My next book, which is called All This Could Be Yours, comes out next September, and I'll tell you all about that when the time comes. But today we are here to applaud and give a standing ovation for the fabulous, gorgeous Rachel Koller Croft and her new slinky, sexy, voluptuous, delicious, and I say that because it's about vampires. We love the nightlife. I know, now you're all singing the song, right? I mean, Rachel is the only person that could have written a book with the title that is an instant earworm. There is just, I've been singing it all day. And I don't mind that. I don't mind that. It's so atmospheric, this book, and so engaging and so deliciously creepy. I was talking to Rachel before the show started, and she said, I just want everybody to have a good time. And I think that's perfect. That's depending what your idea of a good time is. And we know Susie Baldwin is here, and Shannon Hansen is here, and Renee and Randy Trent, and Golden Knights fan from far, far away, and Sharon Bishop and Emily is here. And this is fantastic. Shannon Hansen. Shannon is so nice to see you all today, to welcome the wonderful Rachel Koller Croft, who is sharing today, you all, sharing her pub day with us. Kathy Lanigan says, happy Tuesday, and happy Tuesday to you too. Oh, Rachel, welcome, welcome, welcome. And thank you for being here on pub day. You must be overwhelmed with stuff to do.
Oh, I'm so excited to be here, Hank. Thanks for hosting me again. I love your show and I love you, and I'm happy to be here with everyone.
Thank you. Robin says, hi from Coeur d'Alene. I saw on your Insta that your pub date, according to your Instagram, your tour will have everything from a drag queen, a ghost tour, a pit bull concert, and pickleball. I mean, you got to cover all the bases. And tonight you have a really incredible party. Can you tell us about that?
Yes, I'm very fortunate. I'm having my book launch party this evening on Pub Day at the Shakespeare Club in Pasadena. It's a lovely women's organization that's philanthropic, and we have social events, and we get involved in the community. And fun fact, it's actually where I got married. So it's a beautiful Pasadena mansion that we're going to lean into kind of the spookiness of the Laurels, which is the house in the book, and also the club in the book. We're going to have the red carpet and a stanchion, and I even got hand stamps made of the name of the club in the book, so everyone gets a hand stamp.
That is really cool. That is so much fun. The Shakespeare Club, and so we know that it has really good karma because
Yes.
That's where you got married. So it is the beginning of many wonderful things, and we'll talk more about We Love the Nightlife, including the title, in just about 30 seconds. But I do need to remind you that if you are new to A Mighty Blaze, welcome, welcome, welcome. You have picked a marvelous day. Shannon Hansen says, have a great evening. I know you will. You have all picked a marvelous day to come join us here on Crime Time. Today we're featuring We Love the Nightlife by Rachel Koller Croft. Oh, and Mary Garrett says, too much fun. May the launch be pure pleasure. I want to read. Yes, indeed, you do. Mighty Blaze was started at the beginning of the pandemic 4 years ago now, amazingly, by the brilliant powerhouse duo of Jenna Blum and Caroline Levitt to keep us all reading books and discussing books and being aware of each other here in book world, finding more about our favorite authors and maybe meeting some new favorite authors. And we have persevered, several dozen volunteers over the past 4 years, to bring all of this to you 24/7 on Facebook and on Twitter and on YouTube. And we are happily continuing. Speaking of happily continuing, we are also giving away, well, we're not, I mean, Rachel and her publisher are giving away a copy of We Love the Nightlife to one lucky commenter. So leave a question or a comment or just general adulation for Rachel in the comments, and we will pick one lucky winner on the Wheel of Fun at the end of the show. Rachel, I want you to talk to me instead of doing the comments Rachel is talking about, and wanting to answer each and every one of your comments, and she will go and look at the comments after the show. So keep them coming. She will answer and look at every single one of them. So let me tell you a little bit about Rachel very briefly, and then I will finally let her talk. You're like, you want to talk, Hank? I know I will. Rachel Koller Croft is the author of Stone Cold Fox, which we talked about here last year, fabulous, and the brand new We Love the Nightlife. She is also the WGA Award nominated screenwriter of Torn Hearts, which I bet you have seen. She is currently developing her novels for film and television. Rachel lives in Los Angeles with her husband, Charles. Remember, she got married at the Shakespeare Club. I love that. And their rescue pit bull, Juniper. That all sounds lovely. Happiest of pub days. Rachel, I got to talk to you about the title. So okay. Was it always called We Love the Nightlife, and why?
It was always called We Love the Nightlife. And when I came up with this idea, I thought of the title for a couple of reasons, both of which have to do with my parents. So my birthday is November 5th. So I always had kind of a Halloween birthday party. And my mom had this really cute t-shirt with a vampire on it that said, I love the nightlife. And she just always kind of wore it around my birthday. But then secondarily, because my parents are divorced, it was pretty acrimonious. So anytime they say something kind of cute about the other one, it really sticks in my head. And my mom and I were in the car, and I Love the Nightlife by Alicia Bridges came on the radio. And she goes, you know, Rachel, your dad hated that whole thing, meaning disco. But she goes, but he really loved this song. And so when I showed my dad the dedication, which says, my dad didn't like disco except for one song. And he looks at me, he goes, I love the nightlife. I was like, yes. So he knew it was really cute.
Isn't that really cute? And it is, I mean, it shows you how one little mention of something can just evoke so many memories and such a period of time. And, you know, even as I'm singing the song in my head, as I have for the past couple of days, I mean, it's fun. It reminds me of those days. It reminds me of, you know, the spinning balls and the dancing and how much fun it was and how glamorous it felt sometimes, so kind of transporting into another world, which is where you take us in your novel. Can you tell us a little bit about the book?
Sure. Well, it's about two best friends who have absolutely outgrown each other over the course of 50 years. And their friendship goes completely off the rails when they decide to open a nightclub together in sort of this last-ditch effort to keep the magic alive. But the big twist is that they are vampires. So they have a lot of history between them.
It's so funny when you say they've been friends for 50 years. And I think they're not look old. They don't look old, though. You better tell us. I mean, it is the idea of taking something that's so familiar to many of us, a disco and a club. Part of a life that we were all in, you know, for better or for worse, or for less or for more at one point in our lives, and making this twist, the vampire twist, which instantly and gorgeously makes it something else. What was the first glimmer of your idea of how to add that to the female toxic friendship outgrowing each other equation?
Sure. The vampire element came to me last. So when I was thinking about what I wanted to write next, I'm nostalgic for the 70s, which is funny because I was born in 1985. So it's just, but my mother loves to, it's just always been like in our house, and I've always liked that time. And so I was watching a documentary about Studio 54 that I believe is still streaming on Amazon Prime. It's the one where they actually interview Ian Schrager, who was one of the founders of Studio 54. And I loved the documentary for all the obvious reasons. It was very glamorous and fun to hear all the behind the scenes. But my big takeaway was the way Ian Schrager talked about his business partner and best friend, Steve Rubell, who has since passed away, was just really sweet. And I was really taken by their friendship. And it started getting me thinking, what would it have looked like if two women had opened a nightclub like Studio 54? And then what would, you know, what could the driving story be? And I'm like, I think a friendship breakup is a really interesting thing to explore because it's not always talked about in the same way that a romantic relationship is. You know, that typically just has more language around it, more stories around it. And I feel like with friendship breakups, they can be seen externally as low stakes, but I think, you know, they can be just as heartbreaking, if not more. But
there are no rules about friendship breakups as there are in
sometimes there's no discussion at all. You just stop hearing from this person. And I know everyone has at least one friend that kind of fell by the wayside, and it still, you know, hurts. So from there, I was like, I still think, and I think this is my screenwriter brain and my business lady brain. I'm like, well, I feel like I'm going to hear that this story still feels too small because it's a friendship story and blah, blah, blah. I'm like, oh, what if they were vampires?
Okay, now you have to take us to that very moment, because in your face right now, I'm thinking, what if they were vampires? That's so random, Rachel. Where did that even come?
I mean, I don't know how much you can see, but this is my writing office and I really like spooky things. So any excuse to inject a little spook or horror into my stories, I will take that and run with it. But it's funny, the vampire things that I really like, a lot of people are like, oh, were you really into Twilight or Vampire Diaries? And it wasn't on purpose, but I just didn't read or watch those stories, I think, because I was in my 20s and running wild being a party girl myself. But as a child, I was very into Interview with the Vampire, the 1994 film, and then I read the Anne Rice book. And so there's a lot of inspiration I took from that as far as the relationship between Louis and Lestat, the two vampires in Interview with the Vampire, and looking at Nicola and Amber, and just kind of that chaotic relationship between maker and companion. I thought that was a really compelling power dynamic to explore within the context of a friendship too.
So much stuff that you just said in there. I want to make sure I get to all of it. Just sort of rewinding, when you're talking about Twilight and all those kinds of books versus Interview with the Vampire, and then there's all the Sookie Stackhouse, and we think we know vampires, but when you're creating your own vampire world, like you did we're talking about We Love the Nightlife by Rachel Koller Croft, which is just out today, about two women who open a disco club, and one of them just happens to be a vampire, and what happens to the other one. When you're creating your vampire world, you have to make rules for your world that work. Yes. How carefully did you think about that? And what are the rules of your vampire world?
It's a good question. So one of the things that you pointed out, I feel like whether you're into vampires or not, we all kind of have a touch point to it in one way or the other. We all know that, they can't be out in the sun, for example. I guess unless it's Twilight, Stephenie Meyer did her own thing there. But I kind of used very familiar vampire lore because the vampirism in the book, while important, is very much the window dressing, and it's actually about this friendship. So I did stick to they can't go out in the sun. They have to be invited inside somewhere. But my vampires can still see themselves in the mirror because they have to look hot when they go to the club. So
these little things you have to think of all of them. I remember you all when I was in college. One of the things we had to read for one of my English courses was Dracula, the original Bram Stoker's Dracula. And someone said to me, "It's really scary." And I remember saying so clearly, "It's a book, how scary can it be?" And I was so terrified. I was terrified for weeks. I slept with my arms crossed over my chest, like thinking that would be good enough for a cross, and thinking about the vampires coming in on moonbeams, which they can, you should know.
Mm-hmm.
To take yourself into that world, but then to add the Rachel Koller Croft sort of wit, humor, your voice is so sassy and sexy, that it's sinister, it's superly sinister, but and disturbing, but not scary. I mean, it's creepy, but realistic, if I can say that about vampires.
Yeah, I think for a vampire novel, it's quite grounded. I mean, there are moments, because at the end of the day, they are vampires, and they're not the type of vampires that are like sourcing blood bags or trying to be super ethical. I mean, they typically only attack men, but they are killing people to feed. So there are scenes of that nature. One of my favorites early on in the book, when Amber goes to the Chelsea vampire's home, and Amber's the one that was newly turned, and she's not always comfortable with the vampiric lifestyle. So she likes to make her kills kind of quick and dirty and get it over with. And she goes to these other vampires' house, and they have this like handsome businessman hooked up to an IV, and that's even a little dark for her. So anytime I got to go into the more kind of gothic, creepy vampire vibes, I took it, but it's not constant, and it's not super gory all of the time.
Renee says this book sounds fun, and it is, because we do get the points of view of Amber and Nicole, and so Nicola. So it's different. We're being them and not being just observers. I do think one of the things that's so fascinating about this novel is the power, the balance of power. You talk about maker and companion, which is how it is in vampire world, but in non-vampire world, in our world, in female relationships specifically, there is the same sort of maker and creator, the leader and the follower, the alpha and the beta kind of thing in friendships. Can you talk a little bit about that kind of theme?
Sure. I mean, the maker companion thing to me felt like just ripe for exploration through a friendship, because the reason at the start, so all of Amber's chapters are in the present day, like right now, and all of Nicola's chapters are in the past, starting in 1979, that eventually meet up to present day. And there is a smattering of Victorian times because Nicola is a very old vampire. But the reason they're so attracted to each other is because they identify something in the other that they don't think they personally have. And I think that is sometimes a really unique place for a fun friendship to start. So they meet in a nightclub, and Amber is the type of person, when she waltzes into a room, it's like moths to a flame. Everybody just likes her. She's just one of those people that is a star without even trying. And Nicola loves that about her, but doesn't feel that way about herself. Conversely, Nicola is an incredibly powerful, self-assured woman, thinks she has everybody's number. She has her own home. She has her own cash. Because when she meets Amber, she's in a marriage. She feels really trapped. So they just have, like I put in the book, that they're the A side and B side to the same record. And that's what really draws them to each other. But ultimately, it ends up, starting to tear them apart, because I think some jealousy and resentment starts developing between them, especially when Nicola gets extra controlling, which Amber didn't necessarily identify at the top of their friendship.
Well, when you become a vampire, you don't always know what's going to happen. You don't always know all the rules.
Following you guys.
Surprise. And that's one of the cool things, one of the many cool things about the book. And I loved that comparison you made of the A side and the B side, because Amber does realize that she's an A side. And she's very self-aware about it, but she's still very vulnerable.
Yes.
She's curious, and she takes some risk. Some risks. The book is also about beauty and as well as power, and the desire. You were saying that you made them be able to see themselves in the mirror because they had to look hot. What you do when you go to a club. Talk a little bit about that, the mirror theme throughout, seeing someone else in the mirror, seeing yourself in a mirror, the facade of a mirror, and the desire to be beautiful forever.
Yeah, I mean, I had a very, that was one of the things I was like, oh, if I do make this a vampire novel, I can play with this, quite a bit here. And what was interesting, because I'm writing in a dual POV, so I'm in both of their heads. And like I was saying, Nicola is an older vampire. She's pushing 200 years old on the inside. Amber in the present day chapters is probably around the same age as my mom, boomer age, but both of them look 23. So they have really interesting, almost like a stunted emotional development in some ways, because they've never been perceived in the world as a woman that's older than 23 years old. So they're not going to have certain points of view or experiences that someone that's actually aging in London would have. So I had to be really careful with not making them seem like, I always wanted to make sure everything they did or said, whether to each other or just in their head, tracked with the type of person that they are on the inside, while also taking into consideration how the world perceived them. Obviously at night, at daytime, they're sleeping, getting their beauty rest.
Their beauty rest, yeah, which they need, because they look like they're 23. It's interesting though, because when you talk about, when you read this book, and I know you will, we're talking about We Love the Nightlife by Rachel Koller Croft. When you read this book, it's fun and fast paced, and the dialogue is fabulous, and the voice is fabulous, incredibly wonderful. And the action is nonstop. But just what you were talking about, having to make sure that each character said the things and had the thoughts that were applicable to who they were and why they were that way, is such a deeply thought out screenwriter literary thing. How do you, as a writer, how top of mind are both of those things, the pacing and the structure of your book versus the depth of your book?
They're equally important to me. And I think that's why it's so hard to write books. Like, and I don't want to say writing a screenplay is easy because it isn't, but with a book, you just have more volume, you can span more time. There's just you have a lot more real estate on your page than you do on a screenplay. And for me, I want someone to read this book that's just in the mood for a popcorn thriller and they want to blow through it and they're very into the plot. And that's fine and dandy and really fun. I always want to be entertaining. But I know some people are going to read this book and they're going to see all the subtext in it. And it is there intentionally. And there are really dark things I wanted to explore in the book. Same thing with Stone Cold Fox, which can be read in the same way, really light and fun and kind of breeze through it. Or you can see some of the things I'm talking about as far as how women are perceived in society and how women relate to each other when they're in stressful situations or in an environment they're not super familiar with. I mean, I didn't do it intentionally, but now that I have 2 books under my belt, I write very much about underdogs overcoming. And money is often a theme in my books and women wanting to figure out how to rise above their station in life. It's just really interesting how that alchemy of writing and all the things you do intentionally, and then all the things after the fact that you realize your subconscious did for you. It's so cool.
Well, it's endlessly cool. I completely agree with you. I mean, I'll send my book in and my editor will write back and say, I love this book about redemption. And I'm like, yeah, redemption. Yep, sure. That's totally what I meant. I read an interview with David McCullough, the historian once. This reminds me. And someone asked him, do you have a theme for every book you write? And he said, yes, I do. And I write the book to find out what the theme is.
Right.
And isn't that kind of great though, when that theme rises to the top? Can you talk about that feeling a little bit?
It's awesome when that happens. I will say this book was more challenging for me to write than Stone Cold Fox. And Stone Cold Fox is largely chronological. It's one POV. It's in the present day in a world I'm pretty familiar with. There's a couple flashbacks, but as far as like structurally comparing the two, it was like night and day. Not being punny, but it's true. Whereas We Love the Nightlife
it has multiple timelines, a couple of
timelines, 2 voices, a foreign country, supernatural. I mean, it really was.
Did you write it? Yeah, supernatural throughout. I forgot because now this is interesting, and I'm just kind of thinking about this. When there is a book that includes supernatural elements, the supernatural elements have to be throughout. It has to be a world that has that.
Right. Yeah. And so I had to constantly think about all of these different moving parts. It was the first time in my career as a writer, script or novel, where I did the note card situation where I had to put down every plot point, every scene, because the timelines are alternating and meeting up by the end and everything has to hit in just the right way. And I know you know this too, like the twist is the best part of any thriller. And when you're writing it, you need to give enough information that it makes sense by the end, but not too much so that people see it coming. I mean, it really is challenging across the board. And then I made it extra hard on myself just by throwing in all of these other elements. But certain things opened it up for me. I initially did not have the handful of chapters from Nicola in the Victorian era. And then when I wrote those and figured out where to put them, I think things landed much better than they initially did. But I did so many drafts of this book, Hank. Like Nicola's chapters largely stayed the same, but Amber changed so much throughout the course of drafting. And then if I changed something in Amber's timeline, more often than not, I would have to change something in Nicola's timeline. So it was a puzzle box for me, for sure.
Which is also great. I mean, I think that it's fascinating and reassuring and magical in a good way that when you sort of mind Nicola's earlier days, that gave you answers for now. It's almost as if you had to know that
yes,
to have her be who she is now.
Completely. And I think early drafts, even though I liked them, I got feedback from my editor that we just needed more suspense. Because I'm sure you can tell I have affection for both of them. I like putting them in these like sexy, fun situations. And I have lots of deleted scenes that were really fun, but maybe not they were slowing down the pacing in certain ways. So I had to really focus on the pacing without sacrificing the mood and making sure everything came together by the end and staying in both of my respective characters' voices.
and making the reader care throughout, having the stakes be high enough throughout that you're compelled to keep reading the story.
Yes.
So if you have fun, cool, glamorous, sexy vampires, or predatory or powerful or people who want something, it has to matter.
100%. And so that's why some of those scenes, even though I love them, like I had a scene in the London Olympics 2012, it had to go. It was slowing us down. There were a lot of little scenes like that, but
once I had my favorite scene I've ever written, which was a jury deliberation scene.
Oh yes.
So imagine that, like guys sitting around talking, and my editor emails me and she says, "I love your jury deliberation scene. It is the best jury deliberation scene I've ever read." And it all has to go.
I know. It's tough. It's tough, but as you know, the end result is better for it.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, if you think about killing your darlings, they're not your darlings if they clog up the pacing.
Exactly. So they got to go. Maybe you can use it somewhere else in the future.
It's empowering, though. It's empowering to cut it. Let's talk about the secrets. Your book is teeming with secrets and teeming with desire. How much of that do you know as you start, and how much of it is revealed to you?
I always knew, and I could say the same for Stone Cold Fox. I always know how my books, all two of them, are going to end. And my third one I'm drafting now, I know how it's going to end. And I feel like that is really helpful for me as I'm drafting, because I attempt to outline every time I write, and I do it. But I think my brain works differently when I'm outlining and when I'm drafting, and really exciting things happen that I'm not expecting while I'm drafting. So certain secrets in this book came way later than the initial ideation and made it so much stronger. Then at that point, the outline's completely useless to me because now I have to go down this other.
But you needed it.
Yes. I mean, every step is valuable and it gets you to your end result. I'm just someone that really prefers efficiency, but I guess I'm not a very efficient.
No, you know what? But a good big book may not necessarily be efficient to write. I'm just noticing all the people who are here now. Randy Trent is here, and Sharon Bishop is here, and Kathy Lanigan. And wow, look at all this. Robin Stull is here, and Sharon Carlson Person says, "Happy Pub Day." Tori T says the title is very clever. Renee says November birthdays are the best. We all know what to sing besides Happy Birthday. Now we're all going to sing We Love the Nightlife from now on. So many wonderful comments. Margaret says, "I get it about early nostalgia. I was born in late 63 and fell in love with the Beatles in 76. You're a latecomer to the Beatles, Margaret." And I want, the 70s, where the parts of this book take place. I had my first television job in 1975. So I got the disco thing. How did you do, though, the research? Because you didn't call me, but you might have. Research for 70s London disco.
Well, so when I came up with this idea, I was flirting with setting it in New York for obvious reasons because of Studio 54, and LA, which I love and I live here. But at the time I came up with the idea, I was short-term living in London. My husband is half English. We were doing some work there. It's my favorite city in the world. And I was like, I should just set it here, which made the vampirism element really shine too, because it's a much older place. There's lots of creepy alleys or the mews that people can walk down. So I just felt like that was the place to be. And I did a fair amount of research as to what was going on in the country at any given time during the years, particularly the early ones. The chapter that takes place in 2006, 2007, I was doing my year abroad there and being a party girl. So I had boots on the ground research for that. And also obviously present day. But I talked to my father-in-law quite a bit because he is from Leeds. And so I asked him about specific vocabulary. And then I actually met these wonderful ladies. I was having, my husband was in Istanbul on the shoot, and I just had like a week to myself in London. And on the back end of it, I don't know, I was getting like a little lonesome, and I was going for a walk in Marylebone, and I went in Daunt Books and bought a book. And then I passed this restaurant, and the sandwich board said champagne and oysters, 20 pounds. And I was like, that sounds great. I'm going to go sit in there and read my book. And these three ladies come in that were probably around my mother's age, obviously having a wonderful time that day, big sunglasses, shopping bags, and they sat right next to me. And we all got along like a house on fire. We had 3 bottles of champagne between 4 of us. And every time I go back to London now, I see them. So they ended up taking me. There's a nightclub or a members club mentioned in the book called Blacks in Soho. And one of my friends, Deborah, is a member there. And she brought myself and my mother-in-law there. And we had this nice luncheon. And I just asked them a lot about that time because they were Amber's age at the time in London, and kind of got some firsthand accounts that way as well.
Kind of brings tears to your eyes, doesn't it? That the universe provided these, they weren't vampires, were they, these women?
No, they weren't, not to my knowledge. No, they're lovely. It's really cute. I between like my friends from study abroad and my friends I made there as an adult, and my girlfriends I met that night on getting champagne, I pepper people's names in, even for like little side characters, like, so they have their little moments of glory, for example.
Isn't it great how the world works sometimes, though? There you thought that you were going to have a solitary day, and what you get is gorgeous fodder for your book.
Oh, it was so fun. And now we're all friends. Every time I go to London, I have to see them.
A couple more questions, and then we'll get to the marvelous questions that are coming through. Everybody's saying, how cool, how fun, marvelous. And Renee wants to know, are you still a party girl at heart? I'll get to that question right now.
Yes, I'm still a party girl to this day. I think once a party girl, always a party girl. Maybe your frequency lessens, but you can come out under the right circumstances. She'll probably come out tonight.
I was going to say big, big, big party tonight. This is so, though, and we're talking about some elements of this book, but actually kind of a cautionary tale at its core. Is how do you mean us to feel at the end? And how do you want us to think about ourselves and our friendships and our ambitions and our desires to get to the front of the line?
There is a cautionary tale in here, and I say this gently, but sometimes you have to beware the good time friend. Because I've had friends and like I said, I'm a party girl, all this stuff, but I'm also a very loyal friend. And I like to be a confidant for my friends, and I want to root for them when they're successful and vice versa. But sometimes you meet people and you're having like a great time. You guys go out, like, you can call that friend if you want to go out and have a good time, but you might not call her to watch your dog while you're on vacation, or you might not tell her a really big secret. But sometimes when you're having so much fun on a very regular basis, particularly in your 20s, I think that friendship can be conflated as something deeper just because the amount of time you're spending together. So I think, my takeaway writing this, and even though I get sad sometimes about some friends I'm, no longer friends with, I want you want friends in your life that are rooting for you always and lifting you up, and not being, dramatic and petty about silly things. Like, it's time to leave some of that stuff behind. So,
and a little bit of a Faustian bargain element to it, yes. Right?
Yes, because it's funny. I think if you want to paint with a broad brush, Nicola's the antagonist and Amber's the protagonist. But I love them both equally. I think they have good parts and bad parts, and I'll just say both of them have their reasons.
Both of them have their reasons. Amber and Nicola, the main characters of We Love the Nightlife, the aptly titled, gorgeously titled, wonderful, thrilling, creepy, and absolutely engaging new novel out today by Rachel Koller Croft. Let's take some questions from the audience, and then we'll see who wins. Emily says, Rachel, would you keep writing vampire-ish genre, or would you consider writing other genres?
Oh, definitely writing other genres. I like the idea of, I like writing thrillers, obviously, but I like having a little kind of twist on the end. So Stone Cold Fox, I always called, my hot girl con artist novel. And this is my vampire novel. And my next novel is actually, so Stone Cold Fox was a mother-daughter relationship. This book's a friendship. My next book is going to be about a marriage. So I do try to keep everything in the Rachel Koller Croft voice. But I like surprising my readers too. And my goal is that everyone has such a good time reading my books. They'll go with me wherever I go next.
And they will. But what is the Rachel, you say this, what is the Rachel Koller Croft voice? What is that?
I like my books to be funny, even when they're really dark and creepy, or, all the favorite thriller things we love that are going on. I really make it a priority to inject some humor into my stories because I always have the mindset if we're not laughing, we're crying.
I mean, it is raised eyebrow, sarcastic, sardonic wit throughout. It is so much fun to read. We love the nightlife. Renee says, Rachel, how did you get involved in screenplays?
I am a screenwriter before I was a novelist. Yeah, sure. I'll tell you the story. So it's something I always wanted to do. I think since I was a little girl, I always wanted to be a writer. But I come from kind of a blue collar background, and I just wasn't sure that was something I could ever reasonably do. And I was living in Los Angeles shortly after college, and I was dating who I thought was this great guy, and he was a writer. And anyway, we had this really nasty breakup. And I was activated. I said, if that guy can be a writer, I certainly can. So I sat down and I wrote my first script. And a few months later, I sold it to Sony Pictures Entertainment. And I've been off to the races ever since. I'm very motivated by spite and revenge.
It seems to work. It totally seems to work. Very motivated by spite and revenge. Did he find out that you had done this?
Oh, he must have. I've been in Deadline like 4 or 5 times. He's been in none.
Not that anybody's counting. Not that I love that. That's a perfect answer. Sharon Carlson person says, love this story. Wow. Who else has a question? Which character is most likely you? Most likely?
Yeah, it's interesting. Like, I think between Amber and Nicola, probably more Amber, even though there is a side of me that is Nicola coded. But Amber is kind of a combination of, she's her own person, but I always do kind of take little essences of people I know. And she's a pretty solid combo of myself, my best friend Liz, and my mother.
I mean, everybody in a novel is pretty much a composite.
Yeah.
It's a character is going to have some of the author in it. It's impossible not to, but it really isn't that person. I mean, it really never is that person, but only you could have written them. I guess that's the key.
It's an essence or an element or little things they would say. I mean, I know with sometimes when there's multiple POVs or dual POVs, it's always really important when I'm a reader to like know who I'm with and not have to necessarily go back. So one of the things I thought about was like, okay, Nicola's definitely going to be English and have these very old-timey turn of phrases because she's a 200-year-old vampire, whereas Amber is American and from Wisconsin, where a lot of my friends and family are from. And so I used some very like Midwestern things that she would say. So it was like a good way to help people track who they were with at any given time too.
And then also each of your chapters is marked with who we are on the train with at that point. And I love that as well. One more question. Andrew says, hi, Andrew from California. Rachel, as a youngster, did you have to do other research other than your parents' perspective? Meaning you're a youngster now, than your parents' perspective on the 70s and the Victorian era where your parents did not live. We know.
Correct. They are not vampires. Yeah. I mean, between like the firsthand accounts of the people I had in my life, I did a fair amount of reading about, like, there are some chapters in the very early 80s and things were not going so great in the UK at the time. And I didn't think my vampires would politically care that much, but they would be aware. So I wanted to make sure I had mentions of that. And like when disco died basically and punk was on the way out, like the new romantics were coming in. So I have like a scene all about that. So I did want to be very mindful about where I was and making sure I could build that out so it felt really authentic. And as far as the Victorian era, I really like English history, and I love books and things of that time. So it was kind of a sneaky thing I got to put in. This book has a lot of little things that I just like as a reader and a consumer of media. So I have like an abused orphan Victorian child motif. I have Pitbull, who I love as a recording artist in here. I mean, it really runs the gamut of like everything I just happen to like because I'm the author and it's my book.
I love that so much. Absolutely. So one last question, because you're the author and you can put in whatever you want and we will love it too. One last question, Chuck, and then we will spin the wheel of fun. I know we have a million questions. Sharon Bishop says, will you come to Massachusetts on your tour? Tell us about your tour. Good question.
Oh, sure. Unfortunately, I'm not coming to Massachusetts this time. My East Coast stop will be in New York City. So tonight I'm launching in LA. On Thursday, I'm going to be in Charleston, South Carolina at Buxton Books, which is a fabulous place. Then I'm going to Chicago, which is my hometown. So I'll be there August 29th at Madison Street Books. Then I'll be in New York City at Book Club Bar in the East Village. My very good friend owns it. It's such a great spot. That's going to be on September 4th after Labor Day, because I hear everyone in New York, no one's in town until after Labor Day. And then I will be at the famous Poison Pen in Scottsdale on September the 10th. And at each of my events, this is something I like to do when I go on book tour. I do a door prize. And so I always have some luxury skincare to give away. And this time I have a really great package from Epicurious. It's a cleanser and a serum, a moisturizer, and a mask valued at over $500. So it's a really good prize.
That is, I'm not going to make any vampire jokes about it.
No, you can. It's the fountain of youth, whether you're a vampire or not.
Exactly. You provide it. You provide it without signing on the dotted line. No question. Rachel, you have been amazing. Absolutely so engaging and charming and fun. And I can just feel your enthusiasm for this book. And when you have time after your launch tonight, do come back and look at the comments, because everyone is saying, I can't wait, I can't wait, I can't wait to read your book. And Sue Street says, maybe I'm the vampire. Yeah, you wouldn't be up now. It's sunny right now. We're a vampire. We're not one bit afraid. So Chuck, let's spin the wheel of fun and see who is going to win a copy of We Love the Nightlife. Oh, this is totally the day we should have music for this. We know what we'd be singing. I want to ask you about the lyrics, but the winner is Sherry Reebok. Thank you so much. Sherry is a marvelous fan of Crime Time and has been here a lot. So it is fabulous that you won this book. Lucky you. And you just email me. You'll get some info about that. And you can email me, and I will email the executive producer of the show, and she will email Rachel's publicist, and then you will get your book. And that's how this all works. Congratulations, Sherry. And I'm so glad you won. So I love the nightlife. I love the boogie. Then what?
On the disco round.
On the disco round. I thought it was disco highway. On the disco.
But she has this, I'm not going to do it because I'm not a good singer, but she has this, it's a really unique song. I think she's got such a killer voice, and I hope she gets a lift from this, because it's one of my family's favorite songs.
Well, we all got a lift from it. Absolutely so. I've been singing, as I said, for a couple of days. Luckily, you're not here to hear it, because that would be a disaster. Before I let you go, Rachel, let me just remind you all that two things. One, next week I am off. I'll be at BoucherCon in Nashville, and that's going to be amazing. So I'm not going to be here next Tuesday, but the Tuesday after that, September the 3rd, after Labor Day. Cannot believe the summer is over. We are not going to deal with this, but we will celebrate by having Jeffrey Deaver and Isabella Maldonado here for their first collaboration called Fatal Intrusion. Two fantastic authors getting together, talk about explosions and talk about dynamite. This is going to be absolutely great. So do not miss September the 3rd here at 4 p.m. ET, Jeffrey Deaver and Isabella Maldonado. Today, we've had Rachel Koller Croft, and We Love the Nightlife, and we are sending her off on her fabulous nightlife tonight. Congratulations, Rachel. Thank you for being here.
Oh, thank you for hosting me. I had a great time. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you all. And remember what I always say, it is always safe inside a book. And we will see you next time.